Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Futuretheory podcast. Today, we're joined by Cindy Mitchell from the Millhouse Ventures Limited. How are you today, Cindy?
I'm well, thank you very much.
Fantastic. So tell me a bit about what you do. What is the Millhouse Ventures? What do you guys do?
The Millhouse is Canberra region's only dedicated social venture intermediary. What the heck is that? What we do is we work with individuals who have a passion. So they want to solve a social, cultural, economic, or environmental problem, but they don't want to necessarily use the traditional ways of doing that, which is charity and donations. They're actually interested in experimenting with business models to do that. And there's a particular asset class that we use. It's called social enterprise. And what we do at the Millhouse is we promote and we advocate for the use of this particular business model. And this is about having at least half of your income coming from trade. So that's basically out there selling a product or service so that you can have measurable, definable change in the area that you want to change. So it's really combining sort of, I always say, the heart of a charity and the mind of a capitalist.
Okay. So it's sort of a self-sustaining charity almost. Is that sort of fair?
Yeah, so there's typically a purpose involved. It's not always charitable in the sense of, it's not necessarily fulfilling a defined social welfare benefit. It could be doing something preventative. It could be about working with people before they're actually in crisis. And that's often an area where, people who are doing social enterprise and interventions, they're actually trying to avoid that. So wind back a little bit. The traditional model of helping people is, okay, you're hungry, here's some food, you need a house, here's a place to live. And that's all good. We will always need charity. That's really important. But social innovators, they're often trying to look at really systemic reasons for why things are happening. And they're trying to use business as a way to be able to support that, because often all the money and government support is in that sort of, charity that we're not really supporting vulnerable people. So we can, typically at Millhouse, the first sort of session or meeting with me, I'll draw on the whiteboard or wherever I am a bit of a spectrum where there's what we call charity on one end and Fortune 500 for-profit company on the other end. And then social enterprise occupies that space in the middle. And there's some social enterprises that look more like charities, and there are ones that look more like businesses. And the Millhouse, its members are the University of Canberra and Service One, who are a cooperative bank, as well as the Canberra Innovation Network. We're really particularly interested in the ones that look more like businesses. And so but the people who are attracted to doing this sort of work, Germaine, often they're not business people. So a typical sort of Millhouse cohort, you might have people from anywhere from uni students all the way up to retirees who are coming back to their second or third career, and people who are having a go at saying, look, there's something that I've always seen that I want to, where it's, it could be something around working with youth or Indigenous advancement, or a particular challenge around women and gender or domestic violence. And they're like, I want to do something about that. Nothing that I can see happening in terms of the charity sector or the for-purpose sector is doing something there. How can I use business to sustain my particular interest?
Right. So that's basically the definition of a social enterprise. Or I've heard social enterprise called a for-purpose business in the past as well. Is that a pretty good description?
So look, I'm putting on my academic hat. These words are often interchangeable, and a lot of what I have to do is really talk to people and try to understand what they need out of this, right? So yes, social enterprise is one sort of definition. I also talk about for-purpose ventures. When I'm in academic mode, I also talk about hybrid ventures. That's another way we talk about them. But you know what? My mission and vision and dream, aspiration is that one day we just talk about business, because we will have so fundamentally changed the nature of capitalism that people will go, okay, well, I'm never in this just for profit. I'm always trying to create some sort of tangible community public benefit in my business. I think that's what this movement is really trying to, that's that big, hairy, audacious goal at the end of this yellow brick road that we're on as social entrepreneurs or social for-purpose entrepreneurs, is we would like to transform from within. And the great thing is it's happening, Germaine. Like that's what excites
awesome.
me when I see, Fortune 500 CEOs talking about, well, actually, we care about this just as much as, and like, yes, it's corporate social responsibility. And on one hand, sometimes you can roll your eyes and be like, oh, that's just, but hey, if it matters, it's changing the nature of it.
At the end of the day, if one could argue, I mean, I would argue that ultimately, okay, I do roll my eyes every time I hear about, a big consulting firm, giving the day for their employees to go do something good or go do something sort of charitable and helpful. But ultimately, you've sort of got to look at it and go, is it that bad at the end of the day? If that is happening, at the end of the day, the motivation behind it is almost a separate issue, because that is still change that we're seeing and we're noticing, and it's something positive that goes back to the shareholders in some way, shape or form. It might not be financial, but it is still a positive thing, as you've mentioned, that there's change happening.
I mean, given the traditional, what we know about capitalism, right? Like you and I are both brown people. What has capitalism done to our people? What has it done to, what has it done to, the environment? What has it done? Like, the pure pursuit of capitalism, of profit, has failed us as a human race. So like, it just makes sense that we're now at an epoch of human history where people are going, okay, we got to do something different here. So I think they're and certainly, when I'm just with other people who do this work, we sometimes kind of like roll our eyes too, but we're like, look, whatever it takes to drink the Kool-Aid,
Exactly.
Like, the thing for us, where the tension sometimes come, is where they're like, yep, we're a social enterprise too. We're like, hang on a second, there's something else here, because what we also commit to, and not to be like, okay, well, we're better, but it's different in the sense of, because we exist for purpose, when there's a tension, which there always inevitably is, between purpose and profit, we will always put purpose first.
Right.
So, that's hard for ExxonMobil or for PwC, they can say all the right things, but at the end of the day, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders.
That's it. I mean, the shareholders are there to make dividends, to make money. They're not necessarily there for PwC or ExxonMobil to go out there and do good things. They'd probably argue saying, ultimately, if there's no financial benefit out of this, just keep us out of it. We'll donate off the dividends, but it's I mean, we're getting into the weeds, and I'll probably take us back from there, because
you just asked me what I do, right? And now I'm talking about politics.
That's okay. I mean, so going back to sort of now that we know what the Millhouse Ventures does, let's go back to how it all began. Where did you sort of start this? Have you always wanted to do this sort of thing? I mean, how long has the Millhouse Ventures been in existence for?
So the Millhouse Ventures is, I guess we're going into our fourth year next year. So 2020 will be going in our fourth year. But the history is a bit longer for me personally. So sorry, there's no direct answer to any of your questions.
That's okay. That's fine. That's good.
But yeah, because it's a journey, right? So you asked me,
have you always wanted to do this?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So my background is sales. I'm a salesperson. That's how I came out. My first job was in business development. That's what I love. I love dealing with customers. I love the nitty gritty of that. I came to Australia. So I came to Australia to take on a sales manager job. And then from that sales manager work, I found myself as an investment manager in a venture capital house, a small one. And I really loved I love business. I come from a small business family. That's my thing, for profit business. And but just as I started, became an Australian citizen after I've been here for, the requisite amount of time, whatever it was. And then I started to just sort of notice something about the people who were coming to me as a business advisor and people who were seeking investment. And to put a point on it.
So was this in Canberra? Or was it?
In Canberra.
Okay.
Yeah, in Canberra. To put a point on it, they were all white men. And I thought, well, this sucks. Like that, in the sense of, well, that this is not the only place that innovation happens. And the organization that I worked for at the time, it's still around. It's called Lighthouse Innovation Center, and they still have a microcredit program for women on low incomes. And I always tell this story. That was the start of it for me, in the sense of, because what we would do is we would invest a very small amount of money in female founders. And basically they had between 3 and 6 months to repay a very small loan to us. And what they could do with such a small amount of money and support in such a short amount of time just transformed my understanding of business and impact. Then one day I had a man come to see us about that loan program, and he was particularly interested in working with women from his migrant community. So he had come to Australia as a refugee from Myanmar, and he is an elder, a leader in that community. And he wanted our help to set up basically a manufacturing business, a sewing business for those women. And I just thought it was a horrible idea. Like I didn't think that the stuff he showed me was particularly, marketable, and, I was still wearing my venture capital hat, but I kept thinking about it, Germaine. I kept thinking somebody ought to do this, somebody ought to help. Because what we know about economic inclusion, if you have a group of people who are socially isolated, economic inclusion is a great pathway for social inclusion. So if you at this sort of migrant community, they're struggling to get work. The only work that's available to them is cleaning. Well, if you go clean up somebody's office, people who come clean your office, they probably do it late at night when you're not there.
Yes.
So they don't even get benefit. They might make money, but they don't.
But there's no social benefit, really.
Social benefit. So long story short, I ended up starting a not-for-profit social enterprise called No Sweat Fashions. And what we were doing was, it was a work integration social enterprise. And so that was around 2011. We did that. It was a fantastic. The Canberra community came on board. We
so
raised
how
money.
How did you do that? So you raised money. Did you go into it full time, or how did?
No, I had a full-time job the whole 4 years of running No Sweat Fashions. It was the hardest 4 years of my life. I call it my PhD in social entrepreneurship. And at the time when we started, I couldn't even sew. Like, this is not my area. Like,
right.
I'm not
So you really had to upskill yourself.
Yeah, but it wasn't, that was never the intention. That's not where I could add value. I was the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I was working with people who had the skills. And I built a team and built a board. And but to get to where I am now, I need to move the story forward, which is, after 4 years, we needed to wind it up. And the main reason was that I was no longer in a position that I could manage No Sweat Fashions and a full-time job. And I felt horrible. I felt like it was a time in Canberra where every conversation had to start with, what is this thing? What is social enterprise? There was so little understanding. I was the only one doing this sort of thing. Very isolating. It was really lonely. And then I felt like a failure because I had to wind it up.
Yeah.
And, I just kept, and I went and I took a job in the public service, and I just sort of, I became Canberra public service zombie person. So one day I got a call. So in 2016, I got a call from a friend of mine who had taken a role here at the University of Canberra. And he says, there's this bank who wants to give us money for social enterprise. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And I was like, I think I dropped the phone. I'm like screaming, here I am in the Department of Immigration, like, that's great. And so basically, after having a conversation, I put it back to him. I said, I think you need somebody to write a business plan for you. Can I do it? And that was really the start of, so here I am, a person who had been a social entrepreneur, who knew what the environment was like, knew how incredibly lonely it could be to try to do this way of trading. And I basically committed from that day forward that I was going to build a community where people who wanted to do this work could be supported. They were taken seriously. and they could be respected. And that was really the genesis of the Mill House. And I'm just so incredibly fortunate that I've been able to have around me people who shared this vision.
Yeah.
And so I've learned from the experience that I went through with No Sweat Fashions, and I have the most wonderful board anyone could ask for. That's like the trick to my people that
So,
do it.
Putting a date on this, so now we're in 2015.
We're 2016 now.
2016.
That was the,
yeah. So
that was the business plan.
Mm-hmm.
I left, yeah, and I even just to because I was really just hired to write a business plan, but I knew in the back of my mind
if you do a good job, you've got to put in there.
At the same time, I had a good job in the public service, so I took leave without pay. That was how I sort of eased out. So I took,
so low risk. I mean, did you have kids at the time? Did you have, responsibilities?
Yeah. So absolutely married and had have a family. And we're like a lot of Canberrans, we're a 2-income family, so we don't take huge risks. With that. And,
but you had to be considered about this sort of approach. Yeah.
I couldn't just we couldn't just sort of
just dump it all and go. If it fails, it fails. If it succeeds, it succeeds.
I'm not in. Unfortunately, I'm a bit older, so I'm not in that. And that worked out. And look, it was great. I was in the public service at a time when this is 2016. So, and that's a bit of a thing within the public service as well. Like people who sort of they think have potential to grow like into SES positions. They encourage them, that senior executive service positions. They sort of encourage them to see the world a bit. So I think part of it was like, you go out and do this stuff, and then this will make you potentially more valuable to us when you come back.
Right. But the idea was that you would come back almost because you would sort of see that it's arguably easier to come back and have a steady paycheck and all that versus going out into the world.
I think it's more around it's more around career. It's and I see this a lot with people in the public service who are trying to combine work that they do in the community or work they do in the private sector with a public service career. Right. And I think the idea of a public service career as one 40-year stint in one department, that doesn't exist anymore. So I think, the ideal sort of public servant these days is someone who does have a bit of a portfolio in the sense that they go in and out. And I've never, I've been out now for almost 4 years, but it's certainly something I would go back to. But I'm in a slightly, in a different
position. Yeah. So you essentially in 2016 started a social enterprise to help social enterprises. Is that fair to say? So that's how you set it up?
Yeah, that's what an intermediary is. And so the great thing is we already have in Canberra, in our community, we have a fantastic what we call ecosystem intermediary, and that's the Canberra Innovation Network. And CEO at that time, Sarah Pearson, now Peter Adamick. They've just been such fantastic champions for the work that I do and the work that we do at Mill House. And so we've really found that we slot right in. So we're kind of the sort of social innovation node of the Canberra Innovation Network. And we're based at the University of Canberra for political reasons, but also our home really. And UC is such an important partner to Mill House. UC is also the Regents University. And so in Australia, regional universities have a particular commitment and expectation around community leadership and involvement. So it really makes sense for us to be here and be aligned in this space. So it's, so far, so good.
Okay. So, let's touch about, we've talked about sort of the journey here. Let's touch on some of the mistakes, so to speak, that you made, or the things that you would look back and go, okay, that wasn't the right move. That wasn't the right approach. Anything come to mind? Any sort of big things that you go, to anyone listening, if this sort of situation pops up, this is what I did, this is what I would have done looking back.
So absolutely, and this is a repeating this. So this is a thing that I know about my personality, but thinking that I can do it all by myself. So in this journey, in the transition from having been a social entrepreneur, going back into public service, and then coming back out again, this created a lot of stress for me. And unfortunately, about 5 days before my 40th birthday, I had a heart attack.
Wow.
And it was not, I don't have arterial disease or anything like that. really to me,
Stress.
it was stress. Yeah. And I will always sort of, attribute it to the time, particularly after No Sweat Fashions, and that 4 years of not looking after myself and trying to do everything myself. And that's the founder's fallacy. And if you're going to do something that's meaningful, you have to let people help you, and you have to invite them in to share accountability for what it is that you're doing. Because I didn't share that accountability, when we wound up No Sweat Fashions, I really took it personally. It really hurt me. And I lived with that, that sense of failure, really.
Yeah. Was there a sense of guilt as well?
Yeah, and guilt, yeah. I didn't need to own all that.
Yes, it wasn't yours per se. It was a separate entity, and there were other individuals involved in there. So this is touching on a very good point, because I mean, my own business, we're sort of going through what I would call a growth stage, and because we do marketing and things like that, we inevitably work with all sorts of businesses, and inevitably it ends up being a bit of business advice and a bit of sort of talking people off the edge, so to speak, because they're sort of thinking in their heads, this is such an uphill battle. And one thing I talk to them about is, without any sort of selfish motivations, is about bringing on a team that can support them. And is that, I mean, there's the emotional side of things, but is that true, would you say, in terms of the business side of things as well, and sort of realizing that you can outsource?
People can do better things, and that's a really key tenet to how we run the Mill House. So the Mill House isn't just about entrepreneurial capacity. It's also about the capacity of service providers to be able to support people who want to trade in this way. And so a lot of what I'm doing is I'm actually brokering relationships between the clients that I work with and people like you, and other service providers who come, and they might be involved as mentors, or they might do small pieces of work. And the idea is you start to realize that engaging other people is important.
Yes.
And initially, they don't have a lot of money. And so it might just be a half-hour conversation, or it might be catching up for coffee. But then when you are in a position to afford it, it's like, no, I'm going to pay that person to do that.
Yes.
Because I need to, and it's not like, oh, I have to do it all on my own. So part of a lot of what we do at Mill House is just try to give people a sense of, this is what it's like to have a team. This is what it's like to have a range of people, to have somebody who has that deep marketing knowledge, someone who has that deep keeping and accounting knowledge, someone who has that, IP legal, because you're going to need all of it.
Yeah, you're going to need all of that, and you need at some point. I mean, if your business is always going to stay small, one could argue that you don't need to do that. But for a realistic, sustainable, long-term business, you need more than 2-3 people. You need to sort of have a team of support around you, and you need to know how to manage these stakeholders and talk to them and learn those relationship skills, don't you?
Yeah, look, it's one of the things that we as an I keep using this word intermediary. That's what we do in a business market, right? You don't understand how, it's a two-sided relationship. If you have never spoken to an accountant, you don't know what an accountant can do for you, because you don't know what you don't know. Yes. So it's like, well, and you think, or a marketing person, or a communications person, or a graphic designer, or and I could and so what we try to do in our little bubble, which is our accelerator programs, is we bring as many of these people around as possible, so that you are having a discussion with in your case, a marketing consultant, or with a lawyer about not necessarily marketing or law, but about your business, about your strategy, about your goals, and then you can see different perspectives. Those different perspectives are just gonna help you so much as an entrepreneur. In terms of progressing your business.
What would you say to the people who say that, we're just getting started, we only have X amount of dollars, it doesn't make sense to take a portion of that to pay someone to do what they do? What do you say to that argument of, we only have a finite amount of money, and I can keep more of it if I don't have to pay other people?
Look, I get that, but my thing is, okay, well, that doesn't mean that you can go to a networking event where there are going to be 5 different market people there, and you can't have a conversation, or you can't, figure out how to scope engagements. Maybe you don't outsource your entire marketing business
plan.
Development.
Yes,
but you might go and have some advice, and you might do a strategy session with that person. To me, it's more especially in a place as small as Canberra.
Mm-hmm.
Really it's much about how do you build a good network around you. These aren't just people who you're going to pay to do your work. They're your potential clients.
Yes.
They are going to refer you to other people. Like networking, people just think that networking is going to an event and having drinks and passing out business cards. Networking is going and having conversations with people about your business. That's also part of is.
It's so funny because I feel like people forget that networking is just like making friends. You go to a party, you chat with people, you tell them about yourself, you say, oh, I play soccer. Oh, do you play soccer as well? Who do you go for? I mean, it's an extension of that, but you're just doing it for your business, and it doesn't even have to be all about business, does it? It can be about personal and business. Talk about what you do, why you do it. And like you said, I mean, it sounds like what you're talking about is just tapping into the power of networking and the power of the network.
I'm cultivating. I have this expression. We talk about friends of Millhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So people who, I might not have ever actually had a transaction with them, but I have facilitated referrals. I've invited them to do speaking. Maybe that's a transaction. I've invited them to speak. They've come along to our events. I've made a point to go to their events. And it's all about being able to then when I do need a particular service, or I'm probably gonna pick that person.
Yes.
Or if I'm in a position to be able to make a referral, I'm probably gonna say, look, here are all the people you can go to, but here are my top 3 because I've had dealings with that person. They share our understanding about for-purpose business. They get social enterprise.
Yeah.
And how would I know that unless
unless you talk to them, unless you interact with them, because I mean, you go to a website and a website can easily set a tone that isn't real, isn't true to the business, for both negatively and positively, I would say. There are a whole bunch of instances where I've talked to an organization, had this idea in my head about what they're like, and then you actually turn up and actually get to know the people and meet the people, and you realize that the website didn't necessarily set the right tone. So yeah, I mean, I agree with the whole networking side of things, and it is such a good thing that there are a few businesses that I can think of in my head right now who I keep talking to them and saying, it's not even about outsourcing marketing to me. It's more about outsourcing the other bits and pieces of their business that they can outsource for, $500 a month for a bookkeeper, or $150 a month for someone to maintain their website so that they don't have to do it. And it's taking those, it's not necessarily adding someone else onto the payroll and paying them $5,000 a month, because that might be taking too much off the plate for them, the founder, to keep. But it's about sort of starting to test those things. One example I keep coming back to is when we opened up this new office about 3 or 4 months ago, the first thing I did was get someone in here to clean. Because what I worked out is that, I mean, my parents, Sri Lankan background, we believe in doing sort of everything for ourselves as much as possible. And they sort of went, that's ridiculous. You're not some big shot. You don't need to have a cleaner. Just clean up yourself, vacuum the office, do all that yourself. And we got a 100 square meter office. It's not massive. So it is realistic. But then I did the numbers, and you factor in the fact that I don't have to care about whether Windex prices go up or down every week. I don't have to care about, how tired I am, and because it's not that I shouldn't be cleaning the office at 3 p.m. So that means I have to do it after hours. And to me, a lot of people in a business context especially can see why you would get a cleaner on board, but they might not necessarily do the same for an accountant or a bookkeeper. And it's a bit of a funny sort of world where they think about those things differently, but ultimately what you're doing is outsourcing a task that you could have otherwise done yourself.
Yeah. And building a relationship and a partnership in terms of the growth of your business. Like, I don't necessarily equate, cleaning. Yeah, we have a cleaner. That's a little bit more transactional than my accountant or bookkeeper, because that's the person that's like going to confessional, right? That's like that is the key. They might not be on my payroll, but when I go there, I'm vulnerable CEO. It's like, shit, what do I do now? Like,
and it's strategic advice.
Help me understand this. Like, it's strategic. They are part of my, they're part of my sort of my mastermind group.
Yeah, and you can trust on them and you can talk to them, and chances are they've had this experience before and they've done it before, so it's nothing.
Or they've seen
relatively
it,
new.
you know?
Yeah. I'm aware of the time, and we're going a little bit over. So let's get on to the top 12. This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast. Have you had a chance to go through the questions in advance?
I did.
Yes.
I did do the top. I did the top three. I didn't have. Well, anyway, you can ask me, but I'm not sure how we'll go.
That's all right. We'll see how we go. So, I mean, I assume you've read business books or you listen to podcasts. Do you have any top 3 recommendations?
Yeah, look, in terms of, well, I was thinking about this, like podcasts, none of them have to do with business. They're
That's
things
okay.
that I just
It doesn't
do
have to be about business.
for fun. So my top 2 are definitely 2 African-American culture writers in the US that I have to, it's how I like connect back with my home culture. One's a New York Times one called Still Processing, absolutely my favorite. And The Nod is the second. And then just here in Australia, I love Chat 10 Looks 3. I'm early 40s, so I love Annabelle Crabb and Lee Sales. Can't help it.
Yeah. Awesome. Top 3 software tools that you can't live without.
Yeah, I should have thought more about that. I didn't really have.
I mean, what do you use on a daily basis? Like what if I took away, say, do you use Outlook? If I took Outlook away, would you sort of?
Of course, yeah. I mean, we are an Office 365 house, so definitely that. The app on my phone that if you took away, I'd be really sad. It's called Sleep. It's my sleep app, and it has guided meditations and stories, and it has and I use it every night to help me go to sleep.
Okay. Do you have a third tool that you can think of? Do you use any sort of project management or anything like that, or booking?
No, but I do, because at the moment I do lots of travel, and so TripIt is my other thing, because it's TripIt is a great tool. It takes all of your itineraries and plans. So I've got like 3 conferences and personal trips in the next month, and it puts it all together and keeps it all in one place. And I've been using that since early 2000s, and it's awesome.
Fantastic. That would be awesome, because it sometimes helps just consolidate all these things into one, so that you can the big picture. Top 3 mantras that you try and live by.
Look, I only have one, and it's by a man called Horace Mann. It's be ashamed to die until you've won some victory for humanity. So that's what I'm always like on about. And it really speaks to me, to my sort of service orientation. I believe I exist to serve. And in terms of my leadership, in terms of my work with entrepreneurs, I'm always trying to figure out how can I be of service. Okay, awesome. Love it. I've never heard that one before, and it's a very, very good mantra, I would say. And anyone you follow, anyone you keep, anyone you top 3 people who you agree with, believe, think that they're sort of leaders in their space? I'm not part. When you said followers, I assumed you meant Twitter, and I'm not part of the Twitterati. Right, I have somehow avoided. I know that's
neither
bad.
am I. No.
So no top people that I follow, but certainly people like Michelle Obama and Oprah Winfrey, and like I'm always that those are people who really inspire me, particularly as an African American woman. So I'm kind of always, if they're doing anything, I'm probably following it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we finish off, one last question: where can people find out more about you personally and what you guys do?
Right. Well, look, best way to follow me is in what I'm doing. I'm big on LinkedIn, so I'm Cindy Reese Mitchell on LinkedIn, and also the Millhouse Ventures. We've got a pretty fantastic and active Facebook page. So it's Millhouse Accelerator, and that refers to our work with our social entrepreneurs, or Millhouse Ventures on Facebook. Fantastic. I'll throw those links as usual in the description box. Thanks again, Cindy, for joining me today, and hope you had a good time.